Sean Tan, Senior Analyst at the Center of Excellence for National Security, RSIS.
And hi, I'm Tan E-Reng. I'm a research analyst at the Center of Excellence for National Security at RSIS. So, Sean, we're here today to talk about this recent commentary that we recently put out, right?
Yep.
So, yeah, maybe you can start off telling us.
Okay, so I mean, this arrest of Pavel Durov, who was the CEO of Telegram, has been in the news. So I think he was arrested in August by French authorities, and yeah, our piece is about his arrest and what follows from there. And I think the reaction to his arrest has been quite telling. There have been a lot of cliches, such as how his arrest represents the state suppression of speech, the infringement of the private sphere by public entities, public entities carrying out censorship. And you also, of course, have debates about regulatory oversight by governments and if and when they overstep the mark. However, what we instead contend is that a lot of supposed defenders of free speech or free speech advocates who make these arguments actually overlook the role of the private sector in curtailing public communications online.
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, traditionally, you would think that, I mean, when you think of the word censorship, you would think it's very much a kind of top-down kind of operation.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, it's sort of, you would think that it's like some big repressive government kind of doing it, or at least it comes from kind of a state authority. But what we kind of contend in this commentary here is that the private sector can very much play a similar role. I mean, there was some writings that came out not too long ago. Yeah, I mean the link is in the commentary that talked about kind of the shifting of the structures of power here, where it's not only state entities that have the power to censor, so to speak. We also have the private sector having an increasing amount of weight in this area.
Absolutely, yes. I think for what it's worth as well, Pavel Durov, especially post arrest, has become sort of an anti-establishment poster child for free speech. Some of his defenders as well. So Elon Musk, I'd say, is one of the more notorious public figures. And in reality, what we have observed is that, in fact, public figures like Musk and Durov, who own big private platforms, are themselves some of the most prolific censors of content, removers of content on their own platforms. And a lot of their decisions to remove content are based on their own personal views and discretion as to what is and isn't desirable or not.
Yeah, so certainly with those examples that you've mentioned, those are just some cases where, I mean, probably the most, I guess, like big profile cases or like most prominent cases where we do see this sort of quote unquote corporate censorship happening in a way. Yeah, there's sort of a kind of curation of content or information within these kind of spaces that are owned by the private sector. That we do see quite increasingly often.
Absolutely. I think thanks for bringing that term up, actually, because one thing that we did was we attempted to couch this term called corporate censorship and where it can be found. You have owners of large private firms who are basically making decisions shaped not only on their own personal views but also commercial priorities, for example. So sometimes content moderation or content removal may be prompted by the loss of commercial revenue, advertising revenue. And in some cases, they can also be the state can also use private firms as tools to achieve its own aims. So it's not necessarily a straightforward competition between state and public agendas either. So this is discussed a little bit more in our piece.
Yeah. So I mean, regarding some final takeaways, we do kind of talk about, you can read a bit more in the article, but we do talk about kind of the need to improve transparency and public trust and the things that governments can do to augment the ongoing regulatory efforts to kind of broaden the public's involvement in this regulatory process. So yeah, maybe we could bring up some examples.
Yeah, so we quoted the Digital Services Act that was introduced by the European Union last year. We went through a few of the mechanisms that could potentially be explored and expanded further. Another example involves Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act in the United States. So this is one of the more notorious pieces of legislation out there. So basically, what it did back in 1996 was that it exempted large online platforms from liability, I should say, for user-generated content on their platforms. And Recently, some lawmakers are interpreting this piece of legislation a little bit more creatively, and figuring out how it can in fact empower individual users to themselves remove or customize content rather than empowering large corporations to do so on their behalf.
Yeah, because
So
certainly when you kind of rely on sort of the quote unquote big brother, or no matter what form that big brother might take, there is kind of distinct lack of transparency there. It's really quite an opaque process. So kind of like putting a power back in the users might be able to kind of curtail or at least mitigate some of the problems that could arise from this. Yeah. So yeah, there we have it. I have been Tan E-Reng, research analyst at the Center of Excellence for National Security at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, RSIS.
So Sean Tan, senior analyst at the Center of Excellence for National Security, RSIS. So signing off. Thank you very much.
Signing off. Thank you.